Mark Moore is a nationally recognized businessman and philanthropist. His generosity to hospitals and nonprofits have helped save thousands of lives. But just 10 years ago, Mark had 2 strokes just days apart. He was only 46 years old and fighting for his life. But Mark says his strokes helped him become the humanitarian he is today. In his book, A Stroke of Faith, he shares how nearly losing his life helped him find his identity.
Well, joining us now is Mark Moore. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing journey, your story. And I think it all comes together toward the end when you say, I no longer identify myself in what I do, but what God has done for me. But right before your stroke, tell us what you were doing. You were kind of at the pinnacle professionally.
Correct. I was a philanthropist. I was an entrepreneur. Spent my life raising capital for the startup companies, taking them public, selling companies and growing them. And that's what I did for about 30 years.
Growing up, you a lot of kids in the family, not a lot of money. So you had quite a turnaround here professionally where you were at. How did you view God in the process of all that before your strokes?
Before the strokes, I really viewed God as being in control on Sundays. And I tell people I thought Sunday was God's day, and the other 6 days I was in control. And with the events of 2007, I realized that was not the case.
So what happened that year?
In 2007, I developed a blood deficiency, and because of that blood deficiency, my blood began to clot. And as you mentioned, Andrew, the Saturday before Mother's Day, I suffered my first stroke. The Monday after Mother's Day, I suffered a second stroke. And due to complications of the second stroke, they had to perform life-saving brain surgery. And after the surgery, I found myself with many deficits.
And one would think that wouldn't happen to you, right? You were living clean?
That's correct.
You gave God his day on Sunday?
That's correct.
Living for your family?
I was 46, and I had none of the symptoms of that you would expect that people would have from that would suffer a stroke. I wasn't diabetic. I didn't have high blood pressure. I didn't have high cholesterol. I exercised and I ate healthy. So I was not the type of person you would think would develop a stroke. But what happened was I did develop a blood deficiency, and because of the blood deficiency, the blood began to clot, and that's what caused the 2 strokes.
So you had your first stroke. You come out of it, then another one, and you had quite a surprise when you woke up after your second.
That's correct. The first stroke was on that Saturday, the Saturday before Mother's Day. The Monday after Mother's Day, I suffered a second stroke. Complications arose, and I had to perform life-saving brain surgery. And when I woke up, I remember waking up one morning, and one of those early morning newscasts was on, and I heard the newscaster say, and this week it will be Father's Day. And I was stunned.
Wait a second.
Exactly, because I'm like, whoa, my last recollection was Mother's Day.
That's scary.
And it was scary, and I waited. Matter of fact, to your point, Andrew, I was scared. Nurses came in and out of the room. I didn't say a word because I was scared. And I waited till my wife to show up at 9 o'clock. And when she showed up at 9, she said, hey, you're awake. She goes, what do you remember? And I go, I remember the day after Mother's Day being told that I would be going home on Friday. I go, but I just heard a newscaster say that this weekend will be Father's Day. I go, what happened? And she explained to me that I suffered 2 strokes and had major brain surgery, and I had a long recovery ahead of me.
And you're a man who, during your business career, was cashing and writing large checks, right? And
Right.
Here you are, after these strokes, having to relearn even just the process of writing and signing a check, tying your shoes.
That's correct. Strokes are certainly very challenging and certainly can be debilitating. And in my case, I lost the use of my left side of my body. I couldn't walk. I wasn't able to tie my shoe. I couldn't write checks. I mean, simple things like getting in the shower to take a shower was a challenge. It takes a long time to recover.
So I suppose at this point you had a shift in your thinking. I need to give God every day.
That's correct. And to your point, people always talk about having an experience with God. And I would say that first day after when my wife told me I'd had 2 strokes and a long recovery, Andrew, you can appreciate this. She told me I had these 2 strokes and a long recovery. She goes, but you know what? Because I stayed with you every night. I slept in a chair right next to your hospital bed to make sure you was okay.
In your book, you don't talk about them as my strokes. You talk about them as my experience with God. What a perspective.
That is correct. And because really, the stroke was just what God used to reach me. Because, my pastor gave a sermon as I was going through my recovery. He talked about sometimes storms in our life are to lead us someplace. And that's, in my case, the strokes was simply God's way of trying to lead me somewhere. And I just need to listen to him.
Did you have periods of anger at God, though?
Oh, sure. They talk about, fortunately, Andrew, it was early in the process. and they talk about, the medical profession talks about when you have a life-threatening illness, you go through anger and denial and fear. And I went through all of those. And I tell people, when I wasn't angry, I was in denial. And when I was in denial, I was scared. And when I wasn't scared, I was angry. And when I was angry, I was in denial. So you go back and forth. But the good news is what they talk about in the medical profession on the back end, in order to get a full recovery, they talk about getting to the point of acceptance and hope. And Andrew, for me, acceptance really was surrendering, and hope was really turning to my faith. So in order for me to recover, I needed to surrender to God and relinquish control.
And from a practical standpoint, you were really humbled, weren't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's humbling in a lot of ways, and in some ways, you have to accept where you are and realize, because even when I accept the fact that this is what God, maybe this is where God wanted me to be, I still couldn't quite understand it, because I'm like, well, why me? But Andrew, the real question is, why not me, right? Why not? My wife told me at one point, maybe God allowed you to have 2 strokes so you could show people you could recover. And it was a very telling statement. And I heard that, but I also kept thinking, well, why would he pick me? And answer the question, well, why not me? Why not me?
I love the line in your book when you say, I was a wealthy man, but now I'm a rich man. What do you mean by that?
That's from the business standpoint. I had a very successful professional career, and God put me in a position where I was able to, accumulate a lot of wealth, and that's wonderful. But the fact that I wasn't rich spiritually, and what I realized as I went through this process, I attended church in Fairfax Station, Virginia, called Antioch Baptist Church, and they talk about we are called to do more than just worship. We're called to study His Word. We're told to do good works in His name, and we are told to spread His name to a lost and dying world. And to your point, Andrew, what I realized that I'm called to do more than just worship. And that's all I was doing. I was worshiping on Sunday, but I have to go to Bible study. I need to study His Word. I need to do good works in His name, and I need to spread His name.
And very likely you'd still be living as just a Sunday Christian if not for this experience.
There's not a doubt in my mind that if I had not had this feeling God's presence in 2007, I would probably still be doing that, not a doubt in my mind.
You've left the corporate world now.
Yes.
What are you up to?
Right now, we are basically working on philanthropy. My wife and I created a family foundation. I'm trying to give back. We realize we've been blessed, and we try to focus on healthcare, education, arts and culture, and Christian evangelism. So we're trying to really give back some of the many blessings that God has given us.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey you're on.
Well,
Thanks for sharing it with us today.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
And if you want to hear more of Mark's story, his book is called A Stroke of Faith, and it's available wherever books are sold.